Ever notice like how the K sound in kit feels different than the C in like scat?
Hmm.
Or even why the plural ending on words. It sometimes sounds like an ands and then other times it sounds like a Z.
Right.
It's those little variations of how we say things that
Mhm.
can be just super interesting. So today we're going to dive into allophones and allomorphs.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at how the tiniest pieces of language, sounds, and meanings aren't always, set in stone. They can actually have different forms depending on, where they are in a word or a sentence.
Yeah, and we want to give everyone a clear picture of these foundational ideas in linguistics.
Yeah.
Show how these, small units of sound and meaning can change in these systematic ways.
When you start to recognize these patterns, you really begin to see the logic and efficiency of language.
For sure, for sure.
And the best place to start is with the idea of a phoneme.
Okay, a foam. How can we think about that?
Well, a phone is the smallest unit of sound that can change the meaning of a word. It's not a specific single sound you make, but it's more like a category of sounds that we recognize as new meaning. We know that T and L are different phonemes in English.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's a phone. So how do allophones fit in here?
Allophones are the different ways we actually pronounce a single phone in different situations.
Okay.
Think of the phoneme as like the main actor, and the allophones are the different costumes that actor might wear, depending on the scene in the play.
Right.
They're just variations in how we produce that
You're
sound.
not changing the meaning of the word.
Exactly.
Okay.
It doesn't change the fundamental identity of that sound or the meaning of the word.
Okay, so different pronunciations of the same sound depending on where they are. What else should we know about allophones?
Well, firstly, using a different allophone of a phoneme won't, suddenly make you say a different word.
Okay.
People will still understand you. Secondly, allophones are studied within the field of phonology. That's the area of linguistics that deals with sound systems. And thirdly, allophones are all about how we physically articulate these sounds.
Okay, cool. So I know the sources mentioned something about where allophones tend to show up.
Yeah, that's the idea of distribution.
Okay.
Sometimes different allophones of a phone will appear in separate and predictable environments.
Uh-huh.
That's called complementary distribution. If you hear one, you know you'll never hear the other in that same exact spot. Other times, though, you might have what's called free variation, where different allophones can be used in the same phonetic context without any change in meaning. We don't need to get into the specifics of these different distributions, but it's good to know that these patterns are there.
Gotcha. So I think it would be helpful to have some examples. I know that the P foam was a good one that was in the sources.
Yeah, the P sound in English is a great example of allophones. Say the word pin.
Pin.
Did you notice that little puff of air that came out when you said the P at the beginning?
I think so, yeah.
That's called aspiration. And we actually represent aspirated P as P lady with that little H on top.
Oh, okay.
Now say the word spin.
Spin.
Do you feel that puff of air after the S and before the P?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, probably not, because in this context, the P is usually unaspirated, so just P without that extra air. Both P and P are allophones of the P phone in English. You can try exaggerating the aspirated P in spin. It sounds a bit weird, but you're still saying spin.
Yeah, it does sound a little weird.
Yeah.
What about the tet sound? I know that one had a whole bunch of examples in the sources.
The tet foam in American English is a really great example of how a single sound can have multiple pronunciations. You'll often get that aspirated T at the start of a stressed syllable, like in top.
Ta.
But then after an initial S, like in stop, the tet is usually unaspirated.
Sop.
Just te. Now think about the word water.
Water.
Most American English speakers pronounce that middle T as a flap, which sounds a lot like a quick D. And then there's button. That T in the middle often becomes a glottal stop.
Button.
That's that little catch in the back of your throat, like you're saying, uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
So T, 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 and AL can all be allophones of the tet foam in American English, all depending on what sounds surround them.
Wow. That is really cool. So the all sound too?
Yeah.
The difference between like the L in leaf and the L in feel?
Exactly. The alphoneme in English has at least two allophones. There's the light LL, which is at the beginning of words like leaf or in the middle of balloon. But when the L comes at the end of a word or syllable, like in feel or milk, it's usually pronounced as a dark L hell. The difference is how your tongue is positioned in your mouth. Again, a subtle difference that you probably don't even consciously notice, but it's a pattern and it doesn't change the fact that it's the alphanome. It just sounds a little different.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so allophones are variations that don't change the meaning of the word.
Right.
Okay. What about morphemes? What are those again?
A morpheme, as we said before, is the smallest unit of meaning in language. It can be a full word like cat or run, or it can be a part of a word that carries meaning like the prefix un in unhappy
Right.
or the suffix ing in running. They're the building blocks of words.
Okay. So if phonemes have these variant sounds called allophones, do morphemes have something similar?
They do. Morphemes have allomorphs. An allomorph is simply a variant form of a morpheme. Just like allophones are different pronunciations of the same phoneme, allomorphs are just different shapes or sounds of that same basic meaning unit.
Okay. And all these different forms still mean the same thing.
Exactly. The meaning stays consistent. However, the actual form, you know how the morpheme looks or sounds can change depending on the surrounding sounds or the grammar? The language adapts the form for ease of pronunciation or consistency.
Okay. And the sources mention that allomorphs are part of morphology, which is about how words are formed.
Absolutely. Morphology is the study of word structure and how morphemes combine to create words. The allomorph that gets used is usually determined by rules within the language's morphology.
Can we have some examples? I know the plural S was a really common one.
It is. The English plural morpheme, which means more than one, doesn't always sound the same. Take the word cats.
Cats.
The S ending there is pronounced as a voiceless S because it comes after that voiceless consonant T. Now think about dogs. Here, the is pronounced as a voice Z because it follows the voice consonant tau. And then you have words like roses, where the plural ending is E, it pronounces ease.
Rose.
This is because rose ends in that sibilant sound Z. So it's the same plural morpheme but has three allomorphs, is, ease, and ease. And the one we use depends on the sound that comes right before it.
Okay, cool. What about the past tense ending E?
The English past tense E also shows allomorphy depending on the sound at the end of the base verb.
Okay.
For example, in walked, the E is pronounced as a T sound because walk ends in a voiceless consonant key.
Walked.
In played, it's pronounced as a D sound because play ends in the voiced sound E. And with waited, the E is pronounced eed. Because wait ends in a T sound, we need that extra syllable to make the past tense clear.
Waited.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it seems like the language is trying to make things easier to say.
Exactly. It's about being natural and maintaining grammatical distinctiveness. Another great example of this is the negative prefix in.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, we have the prefix incorrect,
Incorrect.
but it changes to in impossible.
Impossible.
That happens before, sounds like MP or B. And then ill, in illegal,
Illegal.
which happens before the L sound, and
Okay.
IR in
Irregular.
before they R sound. The meaning of negation stays the same, but the form of the prefix just adapts to the beginning sound of the word it attaches to. It's all about making things easier to say.
That is so interesting. So to make sure we have this all down, can we recap the differences between allophones and allomorphs? I know the sources had a table that kind of summarized it all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go over those main differences.
So first is the definition.
Mhm.
An allophone is just a different pronunciation of the same sound.
Right.
And an allomorph is a different form of a morpheme.
Exactly. And then if we look at linguistic level, allophones belong to phonology, which is the study of sound systems,
Right.
while allomorphs are part of morphology, the study of word formation.
Cool. And then allophones relate to pronunciation,
Yes.
and allomorphs are tied to word structure.
Yes.
And then this is important. The effect on meaning is different.
Very much so.
An allophone doesn't change the word's meaning,
No.
but allomorphs have different forms that all mean the same thing.
Right.
Finally, the conditioning factors. Allophones are usually affected by the surrounding sounds,
Yes.
but allomorphs can be affected by those sounds as well as grammatical rules or even just specific words.
Exactly. So in the simplest terms, allophones are about variations in sounds, and allomorphs are about variations in the meaningful parts of words.
Awesome. That table really helped me understand the difference. It's super cool to see how these little tweaks in sound and form work at such a fundamental level in language.
And the coolest part is these aren't just random quirks of language. They're part of a system that makes language efficient and easy to use.
For sure.
These adjustments help words and sounds flow together better.
It really makes you appreciate how intricate language is.
Yeah. Understanding allophones and allomorphs gives you a glimpse into the hidden machinery that makes communication work so well.
Totally. So just to wrap up today, we explored allophones, which are the variations in pronunciation that don't change meaning,
Right.
and allomorphs, which are the different forms that the building blocks of meaning can have.
Yes.
And the main takeaway is that one is about sound and the other is about meaning units adapting their form.
Exactly. And hopefully you can see that these aren't just abstract ideas. They happen every time we speak and understand language.
For sure. It makes you wonder about all the other rules and patterns that are at work in language.
Absolutely. It makes you think about how these variations in sound and form might actually contribute to the richness of communication and make it easier to understand. Maybe start to pay more attention to these little changes in your own speech and the speech of others. You
Yeah,
know, what can those changes tell you about the nature of the language you use every single day?
great question.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
Of course. And we'll see everyone next time.
See you then.